I was born into a rich and important family in Torron Island. I was the younger of 2 daughters, and we were the only children. My sister was 6 years older than me, so we didn't play much together when I was young, and I was only 12 years old when she got married. I remember the day of her wedding well. Many people came, all of them laughing, singing and happy. But I felt sad when my sister left with her new husband, Mr. Carew. She was always very nice to me, nicer than my mother, and so I cried when she went away to her new home in Dublin. My mother and father didn't love me. They wanted sons and were not very interested in me. Just a year after my sister got married, a letter arrived from Mr. Carew. He said that my sister was ill and that she wanted to come home to Torron and stay with us, to be with her family. I was sad that she was ill, but also very happy about her visit. They're leaving Dublin on Sunday, my father told me, and they're arriving here on Tuesday evening. The day came, and it was a very long day. Hour after hour came and went, and I listened all the time for my sister and her husband. Now, the sky was dark, and soon it was midnight, but I couldn't sleep. I listened and waited. Suddenly, at about 1 o'clock in the morning, I heard a noise far away. I ran out of my bedroom and down to the living room. "They're here, they're here!" I called to my father, and we quickly opened the front door to see better. We waited there for a few minutes, and we heard the noise again, somebody crying far away in the night. But we saw nothing. There were no lights and no people there. We went outside, waiting to say hello and to help my sister with her bags. But nobody was there. Nobody came. I looked at my father, and he looked at me. We didn't understand. "I know I heard a noise," he said. "Yes," I answered. "I heard it too, Father. But where are they?" They went back into the house without another word. We were suddenly afraid. The next day a man arrived and told us that my sister was dead. On Sunday she felt very ill. On Monday she was worse, and on Tuesday, at about 1 o'clock in the morning, she died. At the same time that we were outside the house in the night, waiting for her. I never forgot that night. For the next 2 years I was very sad. You could say that I stopped living. I didn't want to do anything or speak to anyone. Mr. Carew soon married another young woman in Dublin, and I felt angry that he forgot my sister so quickly. I was now the only child of a rich and important family. So before I was 14 years old, men started to visit our home. They wanted to meet me and perhaps to marry me. But I didn't like any of these men, and I thought I was too young to be married. When I was 16, my mother took me to Dublin. "Dublin is a big city," she said. "We're going to meet richer and more interesting men than the ones back home in Tyrone. We can easily find you a good husband in Dublin." In Dublin, I began to be happier. I met a lot of friendly people, and I went dancing every evening. A lot of young men came to speak to me and asked me to dance. I liked talking to them. I started to live and laugh again, and I didn't think about my dead sister all the time. But my mother was not so happy. She wanted me to find a husband quickly. One night, before I went to bed, she came into my room and said, Do you know Lord Glenfallen? Oh, yes, I answered. He's that ugly old man from Carrigilla. He's not ugly, and he's not old, Fanny, my mother said quickly. He's from a very rich and important family too, and he wants to marry you. He loves you. He loves me, wants to marry me, but he's making a mistake, Mother, I said. I don't love him. I can't marry somebody I don't love. Think about it, Fanny. My mother answered quietly. He's a good man and he wants to marry you. You're a very lucky young woman. My mother left the room and I sat quietly for a long time. Lord Glenfallen was a nice, friendly man, I thought. I didn't love him, no, but I did like him. He always talked about interesting things. I never felt happy at home with my mother and father, Elle, but I always felt better when I talked to him. The next morning, when I saw my mother, I said only one word. Yes. Lord Glenfallen and I got married the next spring, and 2 days after our wedding, we said goodbye to my family and left to Rome. 3 days later, we arrived in Carrigilla, and I saw my husband's beautiful house for the first time. It was near a river, and there were many trees and flowers in the garden. Birds sang in the trees, and the sky was blue. I stood next to him and looked at it all Elle, and I felt very, very happy. Come, my love, said my husband, you must come in and meet Martha. She cooks and cleans and knows everything about the house. So we went into the house, and I met Martha, a friendly old woman with smiling blue eyes. She showed me round the house. Suddenly, I felt excited to be there. It was a very happy place. Women sang in the kitchen, men built fires in the living rooms, and there were dogs and cats everywhere. Come with me now, madam, said Martha, and look at your bedroom. Then we can take up your bags, and you can wash before dinner. I followed her, and soon we arrived at a big brown door. This is your room, she said, and she opened the door. I stood and looked, suddenly cold with fear. In front of me stood something big and black. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was an old coat, but without anybody inside it. I jumped back quickly, very afraid, and moved away from the door. Is something wrong, madam? Mother asked me. Nothing. Perhaps it's nothing, I answered quickly. But I thought I saw something in there. I thought I saw a big black coat there when you opened the door. Martha's face went white with fear. What's wrong? I asked her. Now you look frightened. Something bad is going to happen, she said. When someone sees the black coat in this house, we know that something bad is going to happen soon to the Glenfallen family. I saw the black coat when I was a child, and the next morning old Lord Glenfallen died. Something bad is going to happen now, madam. I know it. We went down to have dinner. I felt unhappy and afraid, but I didn't say anything to my husband about the black coat. I wanted to forget about it and be happy again. The next day, Lord Glenfallen and I went for a walk together to look around the house and gardens, because I wanted to know my new home better. I like this house and all the people here, I said, and I'm happy to be here with you. It's much better than to run. My husband was very quiet for a long time. He walked with his head down, thinking. Then suddenly he turned to me, took my hand and said, "Fanny, listen to me. Listen carefully. There's something I must ask you. Please, only go into the rooms in the front of the house. Or go into the rooms at the back of the building, or into the little garden by the back door. Never. Do you understand me, Fanny?" His face was white and unhappy. I understood his words, but I didn't understand why he was suddenly a different man. Here at Kajajilla, he never smiled or laughed any more. Perhaps the back of the house was dangerous, I thought. But he didn't want to talk about it any more. We went back to the house without speaking, and again I tried to forget his words and to be as happy as I was before. It was about a month later that I met the other woman for the first time. One day I wanted to go for a walk in the gardens. It was a beautiful day, and I ran up to my room after lunch to get my hat and coat. But when I opened the door of my room, there was a woman sitting near the fire. She was about 40 years old, and she wore a black coat. Her face was white, and when I looked closely, I saw that her eyes were white too. She was blind. "Madame," I said, "this is my room. There is a mistake." "Your room?" she answered. "A mistake? No, I don't think so. I don't think there's a mistake. Where is Lord Glenfallen?" "Down in the living room," I said. "But who are you? And why are you here in my room?" "Tell Lord Glenfallen that I want him," was all she said. "I must tell you that I am Lady Glenfallen, and I want you to leave my room now," I said. "Lady Glenfallen, you are not, she cried, and hit my face very hard. I cried out for help, and soon Lord Glenfallen arrived. I ran out of the room as he ran in, and I waited outside to listen at the door. I did not hear every word, but I knew that Lord Glenfallen was very angry, and the blind woman was very unhappy. When he came out, I asked him, "Who is that woman, and why is she in my bedroom?" But my husband didn't answer me. Again his face was white with fear. His only words were, "Forget her." But I did not forget her, and every day it was more and more difficult to talk to my husband. He was always quiet now, always sad and afraid. He sat for hours looking into the fire with his unhappy eyes, but I didn't know why, and he didn't want to tell me. One morning after breakfast, Lord Glenfallen suddenly said, "I have the answer. We must go away to another country, to France or Spain perhaps. What do you think, Fanny?" He didn't wait for my answer, but left the room very quickly. I sat and thought for a long time. Why must we leave Kajajilla? I didn't understand, and I didn't want to go too far away from my mother and father into Rome. They were old now, and my father was sometimes ill. They didn't love me very much, but I wanted to be near them. I thought about it all day, and I didn't know what to say to my husband when he arrived back in the evening and came into dinner. I said nothing. After dinner, I was very tired, and I went up to my bedroom early. I wanted to have a good night's sleep and think about it all again the next day. I closed my eyes and went to sleep. But I did not sleep well, because I dreamed of the black coat. Suddenly I woke up. Everything was dark and very quiet, but somebody was at the end of my bed. There was a hand with the light, and behind a light was the blind woman. She had a knife in her other hand. I tried to get out of bed and run to the door, but she stopped me. "If you want to live, don't move," she said. "Tell me one thing. Did Lord Glenfallen marry you?" "Yes, he did," I answered. "He married me in front of 100 people. Well, that's sad," she said, "because I don't think he told you that he had a wife, me. I am his wife, not you, young woman. You must leave this house tomorrow, because if you stay here, you see this knife. I am going to kill you with it." Then she left the room without a sound. I didn't sleep again that night. When morning came, I told my husband everything. "Who is the blind woman?" I asked him. "She told me last night that she is your wife, that I am not your wife." "Did you go into the rooms at the back of the house?" asked my husband angrily. "I told you that you must never go there." "But I didn't," I answered. "I was in my bed all night. She came to me. Please tell me what is happening." My husband's face was white again now, and he didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "No, she is not my wife. You are. Don't listen to her. She doesn't know what she is saying." She left the room. I ran to find Martha. I didn't like this house anymore. My husband was a difficult man, and I didn't understand him. Who was the blind woman? I wanted to know everything. "Don't cry, madam," said Martha when I found her. "Sit down and listen to me. What I'm going to tell you is not very nice. The blind woman, the woman in the black coat, is dead. You saw her ghost. She was married to your husband, and she was Lady Glenfallen. Nobody knows how she died. Her bedroom was at the back of the house. Somebody saw your husband with a knife in his hand on the night she died. Did he kill her? Nobody knows. When we found her, the knife was on the floor next to her, and her eyes. Somebody cut her eyes out after she died. Perhaps he didn't want her to see his other women, his next wife, you. I didn't wait to speak to my husband again. I left that day. I was too afraid to stay another minute at Kajilla. I knew that the blind woman was going to come back again and kill me. I said goodbye to Martha, took my bags, and told my driver to take me back to Tyrone. I'm happy living here with my mother and father now. The house is quiet. I sleep well each night, and they are friendlier to me than they were before. She's my dead sister visits me at night, but I'm never afraid. She tells me that the blind woman is trying to find me at Kajilla and that she wants to kill me. She is jealous of me, but she can never find me there. She must wait for the next Lady Glenfallen. One night, a week later, Ermengarde got quietly out of bed and went upstairs to the attic. Sarah was not there, so Ermengarde sat on the bed and waited. At 10 o'clock, Sarah came slowly up the stairs and into the room. Ermengarde looked at her. "Oh, Sarah," she cried, "are you ill? Your face is white, and you look so tired." "It was a hard day, Ermy," said Sarah. She sat down. Miss Minchin was angry with Cook. Then Cook was angry with us. Becky and I had no dinner and no tea. "Does that happen often?" said Ermengarde unhappily. "You never told me. Are you hungry now?" Sarah looked at her. "Yes," she whispered. Yes, I am. I would like to eat that table. I would like to eat you. Ermengarde jumped up. Sarah, she cried, I had a box of things from. There is a big cake in it. I am going to get it now. You and Becky can eat it all. Soon Ermengarde was back. The three girls sat on Sarah's bed, and there were some happy smiles when Ermengarde opened her box and took out the cake. Oh, miss, look at that, said Becky. You are kind, Ermy, said Sarah. She laughed. It's magic, you know. When things are very bad, something nice always happens. Here we are having a party. Ermengarde gave Sarah and Becky some cake, and they began to eat. Suddenly, they stopped. There was a noise of feet on the stairs. They listened. Oh, no, whispered Becky. It's Miss Minchin. Yes, said Sarah. Her face was white again. Then the door opened and Miss Minchin came in. So Lavinia was right, she said angrily. Tea with Princess Sarah. Becky, get back to your attic at once. Oh, please, Miss Minchin, cried Ermengarde. It was my cake from home. We're only having a party. Go back to your room. Ermengarde, Miss Minchin said coldly, and take these things with you. And tomorrow she looked at Sarah. There's no breakfast, no dinner, and no tea for you. Remember that. Soon the attics were quiet again. Tired and hungry, the two servant girls went to sleep. But after an hour or two, Sarah opened her eyes. Was it a noise from the window, perhaps? Something is different, Sarah whispered. What is it? She sat up in bed and looked round the room. She looked again and again, and her eyes were very big. The room was different, very different. There was a wonderful hot fire. There were new, warm blankets on her bed and beautiful pictures on the walls. Sarah slowly got out of bed. Is this a dream? She said. Where did all these things come from? She put out her hand, the fire. No, it's not a dream. The fire is hot, I can feel it. And oh, look at the table. There was a red cloth on the table and cups and plates. There was hot tea and wonderful things to eat, hot meat pies and sandwiches and cake, oranges and apples. Sarah ran to Becky's room. Becky, she whispered, come quickly. The magic is here again. Come and look. When Becky saw the room, she could not speak at first. Then she said, Oh, miss, what is it? How did all these things get here? I don't know, said Sarah. It's magic. At first I thought it was a dream, but it is not. Look, these pies are hot. Let's eat them. Hot meat pies aren't a dream. They sat down by the fire and ate and drank. Oh, those pies were good, miss, Becky said. And the tea and the cake. I don't understand magic, but I like it. Sarah looked round the room. Oh, Becky, look. There are some books too. I didn't see them before. She ran to look at them and opened the top book. There's some writing here. Listen. It says to the little girl in the attic, From a friend. Oh, Becky! Sarah closed the book and looked up. I have a friend, Becky, she said slowly. Someone is my friend. The next morning Becky met Sarah in the kitchen. Oh, miss, she whispered, was the magic there this morning, or did it go away in the night? No, it's still there, Sarah whispered back. I ate some cold meat pie for breakfast, and the fire was still warm. Becky laughed happily. Oh my! Oh my! She said. Miss Minchin could not understand it. When Sarah came into the schoolroom, she looked happy and well. Miss Minchin wanted to see a white, unhappy face and eyes red from crying. How can that child smile? She thought angrily. But of course she did not know about the magic, and the magic did not go away. Every evening when Sarah went up to bed, she found new things in the attic. There were more warm blankets for her and for Becky. There were pictures on the walls. There were books, new shoes, and a winter coat. And best of all, there was always a fire and a wonderful hot dinner on the table. But where does it all come from? Becky said one night when they sat by the fire. Who does it, miss? A friend does it, Sarah said. A kind, wonderful friend. But he doesn't want us to know his name. They began to look at one of the new books, and then Becky looked up. Oh, miss, she whispered, there's something at the window. What is it? Sarah got up to look. It's the monkey, she said. The monkey from next door. She opened the window, and the monkey jumped down into her arms. Oh, you poor little thing, Sarah said. You're so cold. Becky was very interested. I never saw a monkey before, she said. He's not very beautiful, miss. What are you going to do with him? It's very late now, said Sarah. He can stay in my room tonight, and I can take him home in the morning. The next morning, the first visitor to the house next door was Mr. Carmichael, back from Russia. But when he came into the house, his face was sad. Mr. Carrisford knew the answer at once. You didn't find her, he said. I found her, Mr. Carmichael said, but it was the wrong girl. Her name is Emily Careway, and she's much younger than Ralph Crow's daughter. I'm very sorry. We must begin again, said Mr. Carrisford unhappily. But where? It's 2 years now. 2 years. Well, she isn't at a school in Paris. We know that, Mr. Carmichael said. Let's look at schools in England now. Yes, said Mr. Carrisford. Yes, we can begin in London. There's a school next door, Carmichael. Perhaps it was the magic again, but at that moment Ram Dass came quietly into the room. The little servant girl from the attic is here, he said to Mr. Carrisford, with the monkey. He ran away again last night to her room. Would you like to see her? Yes, said Mr. Carrisford. Yes, I would. Bring her in. And so Sarah came into the room and stood in front of the Indian gentleman. She smiled at him. Your monkey came to my room last night, she said, and I took him in because it was so cold. Mr. Carrisford watched her face with interest. That was kind of you, he said. Sarah looked at Ram Dass by the door. Shall I give him to the Lascar? She asked. How do you know he is a Lascar? Said Mr. Carrisford. Oh, I know Lascars, Sarah said. I was born in India. Mr. Carrisford sat up suddenly. In India, he said. But you're a servant at the school next door. Yes, I am now, said Sarah. But I wasn't at first. The Indian gentleman looked at Mr. Carmichael, and then Mr. Carmichael looked at Sarah. "What do you mean by at first, child?" he asked. "When father first took me to the school." "Where is your father?" said Mr. Carmichael. "He died," said Sarah, very quietly. "His friend ran away with all his money, and there was no money for me. There was nobody to take care of me. So Miss Minchin put me in the attic and said I must work for my bread." The Indian gentleman moved in his chair. What was your father's name?" he said. "Tell me." Sarah looked at him sadly. "Ralph Cree," she said. "He died in India from a fever 2 years ago." Mr. Carrisford's face went very white. "Carmichael, he!" whispered. "It is the child, the child." That was an exciting day for many people. At first, poor Sarah did not understand. But Mr. Carmichael talked to her quietly and told her everything the true story about her father's friend in the diamond mines, and the 2 hours of looking for Ralph Crewe's daughter. "And all the time," she said later to Mr. Carrisford, when they sat by his fire, "I was in the house next door." Tom Carrisford took her hand. "Yes," he said, "and you're never going back there. Your home is with me now. I'm going to take care of Ralph's little missus." Sarah laughed happily, "And you were the friend too. All those beautiful things in my attic came from you and Ram Dass. Becky and I thought it was magic." The Indian gentleman smiled at her. "We were sorry for you," he said. "Ram Dass can move very quietly, and he carried the things across the roof when you were out. I couldn't find Ralph's daughter, but I wanted to help somebody. And then Ram Dass told me about this sad, lonely little servant girl in the attic next door. And so the story ended happily for everybody, but not for Miss Minchin. Sarah was very rich now, and Miss Minchin wanted her to come back to the school. She came to see Mr. Carrisford, but he said some very angry things to her, and Becky came to live in Mr. Carrisford's house too. She was Sarah's servant, and she was very happy. She had a warm room, nice dresses, and good things to eat every day. And she loved Sarah very much. Ermengarde often came to visit Sarah, and Sarah helped her with her school lessons again. Ermengarde was not clever, but she was a true friend. On that first day in the Indian gentleman's house, Sarah wrote a letter to her, and Ermengarde carried the letter into the schoolroom. There were diamond mines, she told Lavinia and the other girls. There were millions and millions of diamonds in the mines, and half of them are Sarah's. And they were her diamonds all the time when he was cold and hungry in the attic. And she was a princess then, and she's a princess now.